When I was 12, I built a suspension bridge out of wire and drinking straws for the state science fair. It held the weight of a full textbook, and when they called my name for first place, I searched the crowd for two faces that never showed up. My parents were in Denver that weekend, cheering for my sister at her beauty pageant. I walked home with my ribbon glowing like a small sun in my hand, but the moment I walked through the door, that light dimmed. My dad glanced at the medal once and muttered, "Strange girl, what kind of daughter plays with machines?" Mom didn't defend me. She just kept brushing Jessica's hair, while my sister posed under the living room lights. That silence hurt more than the words. It taught me early that love in our house came with conditions, and I never seemed to meet them. Jessica was their miracle, the child who made them proud. I was the odd one out, the daughter who tried too hard and still wasn't enough. But even then, buried under all that quiet disappointment, a truth was forming inside me. If no one would celebrate what I built, I would learn to build a life that didn't need their applause. Growing up didn't free me from the imbalance I had learned to live with, it only sharpened it. While Jessica floated through life on a cushion of praise and second chances, I learned to survive on my own. I worked night shifts to pay for college, dragging myself from late-hour diners to early morning lectures because no one else was going to carry me. Meanwhile, my parents paid Jessica's full tuition without hesitation, celebrating her potential as though it were a family heirloom. When I graduated with honors, I sent them photos of the projects I worked on: steel frames rising against the sky, bridges stretching over rivers, but the only response I ever got from my father was a cold, dismissive question. "You still renting?" As if all my achievements were irrelevant as long as I didn't fit his narrow definition of success. Every phone call with them turned into a report card I never asked for. Jessica's new promotion, Jessica's engagement, Jessica's upgraded car. They never asked how I was doing. They never asked if I was happy. It was as if my life existed only in the shadows of her milestones. Still, I kept trying to earn a seat at a table that had never been set for me. I thought if I worked harder, climbed higher, became undeniable, maybe then they'd see me. But every effort dissolved into silence, every accomplishment dismissed as expected or insufficient. It took me years to understand that the problem wasn't my lack of worth, it was their refusal to recognize it. Yet the pain of that truth didn't hit all at once. It built slowly, layer by layer, each comparison another brick in the wall between us. I became the daughter who didn't ask for anything because experience had taught me nothing was freely given. I became the strong one, the responsible one, the one who didn't complain, roles assigned, not chosen. And somewhere along the line, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. But even then, a quiet voice inside me refused to die. It whispered that my value wasn't up for debate, that I didn't need their approval to exist fully. I just hadn't learned how to listen to it yet. What I didn't know was that life was preparing me for a moment when I never saw coming that would break the illusion I had held onto for far too long. The illusion that if I kept giving pieces of myself, eventually they would offer something back. I didn't know that the moment of truth was already on its way, disguised as a simple family dinner that would change everything. The night everything cracked open started like any other family dinner: white plates, matching silverware, the illusion of warmth. But the moment my mother slid a white envelope across the table toward Jessica, I felt the air shift. "A little help for your new house," she said softly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Jessica opened it and gasped. $150,000. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. My silence had always been convenient for them. But then my father looked at me with a calmness that felt colder than anger. "We invest in winners," he said. "You're the failure." Forks froze. Jessica's smile faltered. And something inside me went very, very still. I didn't argue or cry. I simply folded my napkin, placed it gently on the table, and walked out. That was the last time I looked back at them as the person they thought they owned. Losing my family was one kind of pain. Losing my job was another. Just weeks later, on a gray March morning, my name appeared in the middle of the layoff list: clean, final, undeniable. I stepped out into the falling snow with my termination letter crushed in my hand, wondering how many times a person could start from zero before the ground stopped catching them. That night, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than any insult my father had thrown at me. I opened the Bennett family group chat one last look before deleting it forever. Jessica stood in front of her new house, champagne bottle in hand, my parents glowing beside her as if the universe revolved around that single moment. "So proud of our youngest daughter," the caption read. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred, then typed a single message. "Thank you for teaching me to stand on my own, even in the cruelest way possible." I hit send, blocked their numbers, and let the screen fade to black. What followed wasn't strength, it was fear. Raw, echoing fear. What if I really was the failure they believed I was? What if everything I had built was just a temporary illusion? But beneath that fear, something else stirred, a hollow space that felt strangely like freedom. For the first time, I wasn't performing for anyone. There were no expectations left to meet, no comparisons left to outrun. I was alone, but I was finally mine. The next morning, I woke before dawn and made coffee with hands that still shook. I didn't have a plan. I barely had hope. But I had a choice: keep trying to prove them wrong, or start building a life where their opinions meant nothing. I opened my sketchbook and drew a single line, the outline of a small house. I didn't know it then, but that line would become the blueprint for everything that came after. The weeks after losing my job blurred into a haze of cold coffee, unanswered applications, and a kind of quiet that made even the hum of my refrigerator feel like company. Denver was still limping out of a recession, and no one was hiring a structural engineer without a glowing list of connections. One afternoon, exhausted and pretending to work in a dim little café called Harlan's Corner, the owner, a silver-haired man with paint-stained hands, walked over and said my name like he already knew my story. "You're the engineer, right? This place is falling apart. I've got $1,000 left to fix it. Interested?" $1,000 wouldn't even cover my rent, but something in his voice felt honest, almost hopeful, so I said yes. For the next several weeks, that cafe became my entire world. I repainted cracked walls, rewired old lights, built a counter from reclaimed wood, and rearranged the space until it breathed again. When Harlan saw the finished room, his eyes softened. "You brought it back to life," he whispered, as if afraid the moment might disappear. A week later, a local magazine ran a tiny story: a forgotten cafe revived by a young engineer. One photo of me, dusty jeans, tired smile, changed everything. My inbox overflowed with people asking if I could redesign their shops, their living rooms, their tiny, neglected spaces. I didn't have a company, barely had tools, but I said yes anyway. One job took me to Golden to work on an old brick house owned by a retired veteran. That's where I met Ethan Walker. He stood by the foundation when I arrived, tall, calm, sleeves rolled up, eyes steady like winter mornings. "You're the designer?" he asked. "And you're the one making sure it doesn't collapse?" I replied. He laughed, and something about that sound felt grounding. We worked side by side for weeks, measuring beams, sketching layouts, sometimes in complete silence, but always in rhythm. Ethan had a way of making the world feel less chaotic. One afternoon, he handed me a water bottle and said, "You forget the world when you work." I smiled because it was true. Later, over dinner near Sloan's Lake, he really listened as I told him about losing my job, about walking away from my family, about the invisible weight I had carried for years. He didn't pity me. Instead, he said, "You don't need their approval, Wendy. You've already built something they can't touch." It was the first time in years I felt seen without needing to earn it. Weeks passed before he called with a question that jolted something old and forgotten inside me. "Ever thought about designing a self-sustaining home? Small, simple, completely independent." It was the dream my father once dismissed as foolish. But Ethan believed in it and in me. We found 5 acres of land in Oregon, overlooking the ocean. The owner, an older man with grief in his eyes, lowered the price when he heard our plan. Ethan covered the rest without hesitation. "No strings," he said, "just partnership." And so, with nothing but a tent, a few tools, and a shared vision, We began building the first version of the life I had always wanted but never believed I deserved. It was the beginning of my rebirth. 10 months after we first pitched our tent on that raw patch of Oregon soil, the cabin finally stood 600 square feet of pale wood, wide windows, solar panels humming softly in the sun. It wasn't just a house. It was every piece of myself I had ever been told wasn't enough, rebuilt into something solid and undeniably mine. When the morning light hit the porch, the whole place glowed like it had a heartbeat. I took a single photo and posted it with a caption, "Built this myself." By dawn the next day, it had gone viral. Messages poured in from strangers who said my story made them believe in starting over. The world saw me in a way my own family never had. But fate has a timing of its own. On a quiet May morning, as I planted lavender along the walkway, the sound of tires skidding on gravel snapped the calm in half. A silver BMW stopped just short of the gate. Jessica stepped out, perfect hair, trembling hands, eyes wide as they traced the cabin behind me. She lifted her phone and whispered into it, "Dad, you need to come here. Now." When she finally looked at me, her face crumpled. "They said you lost everything, that you ran off." I wiped soil from my gloves. Guess they were wrong. She touched the cabin wall, her voice breaking. "You have everything. And I don't even know who I am anymore." For the first time, I didn't feel anger, just a deep sadness for both of us. Minutes later, my parents' SUV pulled up. My father stepped out first, face red with disbelief. "Where did you get the money for this? You expect me to believe you built it alone?" I met his stare calmly. "From the day you called me a failure, I started collecting something you couldn't take: my work, my grit, my peace. This is what I built with it." My mother's voice trembled. "We only wanted what was best for you." I laughed softly, not unkind. "No. You wanted what made you look best." My father stepped closer, scanning the cabin like he was hunting for a flaw. "You did this to spite us." I shook my head. "I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it to survive you." The woods fell silent around us. Ethan walked out onto the porch, standing quietly beside me, steady, warm, unshaken. For the first time, my father's eyes flickered with something unfamiliar. "Shame." "Did you build all of this for revenge?" he asked. I took a breath. "Revenge would mean I still care what you think." Jessica's eyes filled. My mother covered her mouth with shaking hands. My father looked smaller than I had ever seen him. "We were wrong," he whispered. But the truth was, I no longer needed their apology. I no longer needed anything from them. I had already freed myself the day I walked away from their table. They left quietly, their SUV disappearing down the gravel road as the forest exhaled around me. I stood there on the porch, Ethan's arms slipping around my shoulders, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely, beautifully whole. The confrontation I had feared for years hadn't broken me. It had revealed the strength I'd been building all along, strength rooted in the life I created, not the love I never received. A week after they drove away, a cream-colored envelope appeared in my mailbox, no return address, just my name written in my father's careful handwriting. For a long moment, I simply held it, feeling the weight of years settle into a single square of paper. Inside was a photo of our old house with a for sale sign planted in the front yard and a letter written in uneven lines. He wrote that they were letting go of the life they had built on comparison and fear, that they finally understood how deeply their love had been shaped by expectations instead of acceptance. "We loved you in the wrong way," he said, "and we're trying to start over. For the first time, we are proud of you." I didn't cry. I didn't write back. Instead, I stepped outside into the soft Oregon air and planted a young tree near the porch, a quiet promise to myself that healing didn't need to look like reconciliation. It could simply look like growth. That evening, Ethan walked toward me carrying a small walnut box he had carved from the first fallen tree we cut when building the cabin. I opened it to find a simple wooden ring resting inside, warm and smooth, shaped by his hands. "Wendy Bennett," he said gently, "will you keep building with me?" A laugh slipped out, half joy, half disbelief, as tears finally gathered in the corners of my eyes. Only if we draw the blueprint together, I whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that makes the world feel steady. We stood on the porch as the sun dipped behind the pines, golden light pouring across the cabin walls we had raised board by board. I thought of the girl who once built a suspension bridge out of drinking straws and wire, searching the crowd for parents who never came. I thought of the woman who walked away from a dinner table where love had conditions. And now, here I was rooted, steady, finally free. That night, I wrote a final line in my journal. They gave her money. They gave me silence. But silence became my foundation. The wind slipped through the trees like a soft reminder that not all endings are loud, some are gentle, steady shifts toward the life you were meant to build. If you've ever been told you'll never make it, let my story be the quiet proof that you can rise without applause, rebuild without permission, and create a life that no one can take from you. And if this touched something inside you, tell me, what would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts, subscribe, stay for the next story. You're not alone.